Hey, good Friday morning, everybody. BAM Weather Meteorologist Brett Waltz here, giving you a long-range forecast update, guys. I hope y'all are doing well this morning. Going to give an in-depth look at the rest of June, a pattern change coming up, and as we work into the start of July, weeks 3 and 4 goes all the way out through the early portion of July. But in the short term, we have storm activity that we continue to monitor across the southern southeast plains, working into the Arklatex region this morning. You can see here a notable cluster of storms. It's been producing widespread damaging winds along this line as we've gone throughout the morning hours. Actually had a couple of tornadoes. I think there was a tornado warning in Norman, Oklahoma. And so this storm cluster continues to pack a punch this morning. And along this boundary here, guys, we've got storms forming out in southern Illinois. These will push further off to the east throughout this morning. If we put the radar in motion, you can see kind of moving towards and along the Ohio River. And then the atmosphere will destabilize a little bit as we work into the afternoon. And anywhere really across Kentucky, much Tennessee, southeast Missouri, northern Arkansas here, far southern Indiana, will be at play for some strong to severe storm risk. Specifically, if you were in the orange area here, that's where more widespread severe threats will be. Large hail more than an inch in diameter and damaging winds of 60 to 70 miles an hour will be on the table here, guys. If you were in the yellow area, 40 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts and some of the stronger storms will be more scattered in nature, and then any kind of stronger storm threat in the green area will be more localized, a little bit more isolated, not quite as impactful. So the further south you go in the Ohio Valley and into the Tennessee Valley will be where the risk is the biggest. If we take a look here, take a look at the future radar on the Clarity platform, guys, and we'll kind of give you an idea of how we expect this activity to progress throughout the rest of the morning. You can see that slowly but surely this activity out in Missouri and Arkansas will begin to weaken a little bit. Let me slow down this a little bit so it's a bit easier to watch. But we start to see some redevelopment happen, again, along this boundary as we work into an environment that has destabilized a little bit this afternoon. And what that will allow to happen is, a decent little line of storms moving from southern Indiana across Kentucky into northern parts of Tennessee. Damaging winds probably the biggest threat, but some large hail as well. And then you can see this cluster activity continuing to move across eastern Kentucky and into eastern Tennessee as we work throughout the evening and into the early overnight hours. And so a decent little threat here. It's certainly not the biggest severe weather threat that we've had so far this season, but at the very least will bring some stronger storms to potentially severe storms through the Ohio Valley today. Real quick, guys, before we get into the forecast, I did just want to give an update on how we are looking with our June forecast. Here was our June outlook that we put out at the end of May in terms of, heavy rains, moisture across the southern tier of the United States, some of that into the southwestern U.S. and the southwestern plains, and seasonable to slightly below normal precipitation across Iowa, northern Illinois, Wisconsin. So that was what our June outlook was. Here's a look at month to date. Obviously, that's only the first 5 days of the month. You can certainly see the rains down in the south and to the west. We've had the heavier rains in spots as we expected to start out this month, but you can see here there were some gaps in some of the moisture in this region that we had below normal. And if you look at the next 2 weeks, you can kind of see this corridor of normal to slightly below normal precipitation chances beginning to pick up. You're never going to be perfect with a monthly outlook, but I would say that all things considered, as a general idea, this probably won't be that far off. I think when all is said and done, if we verify this may be ticked a touch west. You might extend some of this normal to above normal moisture through here. But I think all things considered, it's not that far off how we ultimately will verify. So just wanted to give, again, a quick check in there in terms of how that forecast is verifying as things stand now. We'll have another update on that after the month is over. Looking at the pattern ahead, here's the next 5 days. And this has kind of been the pattern that we've dealt with, where you have this big ridge of high pressure out on the west coast, all this heat situated out here. You get cold fronts east. It's been cooler over the last couple of weeks on average. We've had some warmer days in there, but it hasn't been anything notable. But we see a shift. We see a shift coming. Things start to change. The Pacific Ocean starts to change. We start to build in some higher pressure near Alaska, forces some cooler air out into the western United States, and it's going to pump this ridge up in the middle of the country. And so instead of like real storm systems and cold fronts, we start to get in more of this northwest flow type of a pattern. That's where you can get the storm clusters, the stronger storm clusters, and they'll be further north. Again, we've got one moving through this area this morning, but we'll start to see them further to the north. Can produce heavy rain at times, it can produce damaging winds, but it also tends to offer up a very messy pattern. If you've been with us in years past, we call this kind of the have and have not pattern, where a lot of areas in the area that I just circled will cash in on moisture, and in some cases some heavy rains. Other spots could get skipped over. That is an increasing risk when you get this type of a pattern. It's the have and have nots. Your neighbor 50 miles to the north gets hit with some heavy rain and you get skipped out. That's the type of pattern that this is that we'll be setting up, but we'll try to break through the noise as much as possible as we go throughout this video. We start to see that set up in the week 2 time frame. The next 7 days, again, continuing to lean a little bit cooler, and it's not as active across the middle of the country here. Nebraska, Iowa, Northern Illinois, this region in here, compared to normal, a decent bit drier than normal over the next 7 days, with the corridor of heavier rains shifting further down to the south. That black circled area that we have there could trend a little bit wetter in the short term versus current model guidance. As we go into the week 2 time frame, we warm up the pattern a little bit. Again, I don't think it's notable. We could have some much above normal temperature days in this region here in the north central part of the country, but it's not extreme. Not forecasting record-breaking heat or anything like that by any means. In terms of precip, as this happens, though, we start to shoot these storm clusters kind of across the country. We still have some return flow bringing moisture to the south into the southeast United States as well. But I would monitor, if you're in this red area, not bone dry, but I wouldn't be shocked if you end up a little bit drier. There's less widespread moisture compared to areas further to the south and to the east, kind of in this corridor in here. And in general, the further south and west that you work, you can kind of see this transition, the less widespread that the rains will be in the week 2 period. Now, the question is, does this linger? Do we keep this pattern around? If I take a look at our tropical forcing signals, we're starting to see a lot of upward motion develop here in what we would call MJO phases 4 and 5, the Eastern Indian Ocean and into the maritime continent and Indonesia, and downward motion here in the Atlantic Ocean. If we look at what that typically leads to in terms of temperatures here, MJO phases 4 and 5, it would maybe indicate some kind of fronts at times to the north, but nothing consistent. You look at MJO phase 5, it's a pretty warm signal. And it would indicate that maybe the western plains, parts of the northwest plains, could start to see some bouts of heat late June into early July, more notable than what we've dealt with. What's good right now is that we've got support. If you look at the CFS forecast here, it's not matching exactly, but I think it matches the idea as well as it can. Generally averaging out warmer than normal for the ag belt, right through the central part of the country. It tries to put in some cold fronts here into the Canadian prairies, which I think it's trying to see with MJO phase 4. It's not out of the question. And more seasonable to cooler south and to the east. I really don't see a big reason to disagree with this idea. I think that, is it locked in incredibly hot like phase 5? Not necessarily. We talked about phase 5 on Tuesday. It's a hotter and drier phase, there's no doubt about it. But with some of this influence lingering in, it may not be on the extreme side of things, at least not yet. If you take a look at precipitation, I think that this highlights it very well. Northwest flow, messy storm clusters across the upper Midwest, Great Lakes, above normal moisture, Ohio Valley. You can kind of see both of them trying to hint at that idea, where they're both consistently dry and where the CFS has it drier as well, kind of the west central plains in here. Both phase 4 and phase 5 are drier in here. You can kind of see the CFS trying to pick up on that, and then the messier storm cluster risk to the north and moisture to the south along the Gulf Coast. So data and analogs here talking pretty well. In terms of our global winds, dropping more negative, that also tends to support a generally milder pattern winning out. The UPS, it's on board too. It's pretty similar to both of the ideas that we just showed. And here's a look at its precipitation forecast. Again, it's a little bit further south. It's had a bias to be too far south with the dryness. But generally speaking, the further west that you go, the drier that it is. And it's more active in the east. And so, couple of things in terms of takeaways here. Here's our day 10 to 20 severe weather outlook. Severe storm cluster risk will pick up beyond the 15th of the month. I would expect this to roll forward over into the end of June and into the start of July as well if you're in these areas. In terms of temperatures, again, we're not favoring extremely above normal temperatures, but much above normal temperatures beginning to bleed in more consistently into parts of the northern plains and the central plains. If there's a risk, if we feel more MJO phase 5, more negative or a stronger negative AAM, weaker global winds than what's currently indicated, this much above normal risk could come further to the east. That's a risk to monitor. We continue to note it up here. I don't see strong enough signals to forecast that yet, but I do think it's a risk worth monitoring, maybe more so into the start of July. Something to keep an eye on. Regardless, core of the warmth we're favoring on average being further to the west. In terms of precipitation here, guys, here's what I've done. Green areas generally wetter than normal. Brown and red areas below normal to much below normal. But I have this dashed area. If you're in this dashed area, regardless of whether you average out above or below normal, you're probably going to have these have and have-nots. Messy storm clusters. Okay, guys? There will be spots within the above normal precip area that get skipped over. It's just the nature of how this works. There will be spots in the below normal precipitation area that gets locally heavier. In each case, it's not as widespread. You know, there's probably more widespread above normal range to the east, more widespread below normal range to the west. But that's just the nature of the messy storm cluster. You know, there's going to be some folks in here, guys, you're going to get frustrated because you might need rain and guys around you are getting rain and you're getting skipped out. That's the type of pattern that we're going to be dealing with ahead. Can be a frustrating pattern, both to forecast and to experience for you all. So I want to make sure that you are aware of it now. Again, the further east you are, the more frequent and widespread these clusters will be. I will note, if there is a forecast risk, if that warmer risk further east pans out, like we noted on the last slide, we would expand this dryness more so into this region in here. It would just expand a little bit further to the east, and you would divert more of these storm clusters around the ridge through here, more through the northern plains, Great Lakes, and into parts of the northeast. So that's the risk. That's the general idea ahead. If you have more detailed questions on this type of pattern, again, on the Clarity platform, you have access to the Clarity chat. You can reach out to us if you have that feature and ask us more detailed questions. It will definitely be a pattern, guys, if you're trying to make outdoor plans late June, early July. Again, if you have access to that chat feature, that you're going to want to be messaging us to allow us to communicate more specific details for your location, because it's just a tricky pattern and model data will struggle. Model data will struggle. We've seen it for years and years and years. They will struggle again, and being able to help you there on that chat is going to be, I think, very valuable in this pattern ahead. Guys, that's all that I have for today. We hope that you all have a fantastic weekend. We'll talk on Monday.